This is why getting the respondent to open up is absolutely essential, because opening up, letting go, getting into the emotional space, getting respondents to sit down, right, does a number of things. Firstly, it strips away the realisation that they're in a market research group. Now, let's face it, the vast majority of our respondents turn up to quite a number of groups. I mean, they're on panels. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any problem with panels or the people coming to groups, right? We want them to do that. But, they know they're going to come. There's going to be a Q&A, there's going to be a table, there's going to be some snacks, they've got to answer some questions and, etc. This does away with that. So automatically they're disarmed. They're like, what is this? This is like some kind of bad, bodgy sort of market research, whatever, we're going to go with it, right? It's different, we're going to go with it. So already it's refreshing. But getting them to open up is essential, right? Because they feel better about the group, they feel better about themselves, and very importantly, they feel energized, right? And that energy is basically what we want from them, because we're trying to capture their energy. We're trying to get their thoughts, get their needs, get their desires, which are all forms of energy, right? So we don't want to block that energy. We don't want to put them behind a table to block that energy, right? We don't want them to put them on a pretentious couch with a coffee table to block the energy. We want the energy to be free flowing, because we, the researcher, the marketers, need to capture that energy to make the diagnosis, right? Okay, so people not feeling tired at the end of a group is an indication that we've done the right thing, not vice versa, right? I know it sounds counterintuitive, but that's a very, very important thing to understand. Don't let the respondents hide themselves. Don't let the respondents hide away, right? And that doesn't mean make sure everyone says something like we do in a group. It doesn't mean that at all. And you'll see why that's not important in Brand Odyssey in a minute. Now, the next stage of the exposition of the respondent or the consumer is a story, right? So before they've come to the group, we've asked them to write down a story. And the story is of their most powerful memory of X, Y, or Z, the subject matter. I can't go into too many details here, but I can give you the basic process, right? It's very ad hoc, and it's a very open-ended instruction to them. Do this at home before you come to the group. Maybe also make a collage or something, or a bunch of pictures to reflect that story, but you're not allowed to use you're not allowed to use advertising of that brand or the category in order to make the collages, right? So we've got to get them outside of the world of marketing. We don't want them to play back what's already in magazines about the brand. We know that. We can just look at the magazine ourselves, right? So bring that story along. Now, you don't tell the respondent beforehand that they're going to read this story out in the group. Once you do that, you're going to get a different story. Trust me. I know that, because every time they've come to the group and I say, have you managed, did you all manage to do your stories? Yes. Okay, now we're going to start the group by getting each of you to read out your stories one by one. Don't summarise the story, just read it out as you've written it. Now, often you get unconscious glances around the room and a bit of groaning from the respondents, and they say, every group, oh God, I didn't know I had to read this out. Fantastic. That's exactly the response we want, because that comment means if they did know they had to read that story out, they would have written a different story. A story that was not truthful, a story that didn't expose anything about themselves, right? We don't want that. We want them to expose something. Right? We don't want them to be guarded. People will guard their emotions and their experience given 1 second, right? Given 1 second chance, people will guard themselves. So we don't want to give them that chance. Now we're going to read out our story. It just basically means, look, it's not a big deal, right? Once someone starts to, you get a volunteer, someone starts to read out their story, and they tell you about themselves, and people listen, the respondent, because you're interested. We're all interested in each other's experiences, and that's what this kind of is. This group is a bunch of experiences, and the other respondents are interested, and I'm interested, and sometimes people clap at the end of the story. There's no right or wrong answer in the story. You just encourage them. And all that happens is, not only are those stories actually have proven to be singularly important in determining the codes of the category that we need to figure out, not always. Often the stories are very, very important in that respect, but they are really, really important because it means that we create empathy in the group, right? We begin to understand why the category is so important to us, why the minutiae of everyday life and our everyday brands are so important to us. That feeling of empathy is really, really important for research and a really important part of Brand Odyssey. So at the end, people, are really interested, and people laugh during the stories as well, but it means that they're empathizing, they're getting in touch, we're sharing feelings, And this is the thing, we're not asking them any questions, are we? We're getting information from them, we're getting emotional responses from them, but without asking them any questions. So for me, this is a real breakthrough. We're getting really potent, useful information from consumers without asking them questions, just by getting them to do this exercise. And they've actually they write it at home and they turn up and read it up. All right? Let's summarise this first half hour of the group. They've taken off their shoes, they've sat on the floor, we've done the same as the moderator of the group, right? That first half hour, is spent sitting down, reading out the stories, and you encourage them, right? I'm not going to instruct people on how to be moderators, you already know that. But, thank you very much, it was very candid of you to tell us that about yourself, what a great way to finish, what a great story. That was short but very succinct. And, the thing is, you do not ask them any questions about their story. Very important, do not ask them to justify why they've written what they've written, right? Don't do that, right? We need to encourage them. Right? We can't ask them to justify their story because there is no justification to that story in reality. They just wrote it because we asked them to describe a powerful memory or a powerful emotion or experience, basically, right? But don't worry. You don't need to have them explain the story to you. Once you collect a bunch of these stories from a bunch of different groups, you will see how meaningful these stories are, and you don't need that person to describe that story to you anymore. You will just read it. You will take it away with you, and you will reread these stories. You will watch the tapes again from the groups, and you will figure out what they mean, what these stories mean. You don't have to worry about that. You don't need the respondent to tell you what it means because they don't know. Okay, they don't know. That's up to us. That's what we're paid to do. It's our job to work out the basic meaning. The other thing, the last thing, and this is just as the introduction to the group process, it's often very useful for the moderator to paint themselves as being very distant to marketing and very distant to the category. So I do this by saying, look, I'm not a marketer, but I'm paid by people who make products and services to do these things because I'm an objective observer. I don't have any vested interest in marketing at all. I just do these sort of groups just to get information. And I've really got to tell you that today the group is not just about information. Actually, I'm not really going to be asking you too many questions. So most of the group is actually experimental. I'm just trying out different things with people. That's why we're sitting on the floor and all this kind of stuff, right? So that actually helps. Because make up your own story. But that helps because they're in a situation where this is not a market research group and you're telling them that this is not a market research group, and so by this stage they're kind of half believing you, right? They're half believing you that, like, okay, maybe this is something different altogether. You've got to distance yourself from marketing and from advertising totally in order to access the emotional part of the consumer. Otherwise they put blockages up. Because consumers are really savvy. We're talking to people who've grown up watching advertising and television their whole lives. They've been watching TV since before they could speak or think, probably, right? So that's why people are so savvy. That's why consumers can deconstruct everything that they see on the TV because they've been trained. They've been watching it since they were little kids. In fact, if you talk to little kids and teenagers today about advertising, they have the capacity to deconstruct a whole advertising campaign and also construct one for you as well. Now, you all know that as marketers. But it doesn't help to develop insight, right? That's actually an impediment to developing insight. We don't want a playback of what you've put out there. We don't want that playback. We want insight. That's the very important.